Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we review Come and See, the debut album from Gurriers, and the latest music from the week that was. But first, Hunter S. Thompson once wrote, "We had all the momentum. We were riding on the crest of a high and beautiful wave. So now, less than 5 years later, you can go on a steep hill in Las Vegas and look west. And with the right kind of eyes, you can almost see the high water mark, that place where the wave finally broke and rolled back." That was from his book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where he was speaking about the end of the 1960s and the hippie movement. This is well before Hunter S. Thompson became a meme or someone that dickheads on Twitter would use for their profiles and quote without understanding the difference between Hunter S. Thompson, the writer, and a Johnny Depp movie from the 1990s. Why, though, am I bringing up Hunter S. Thompson and that quote in particular? Well, here on the Last Mixtape podcast, we're on a hill of sorts. So we're looking out at the Irish music scene. And in this episode, the Irish indie and noise rock scene. A steep hill indeed to look out on. And wondering if the wave is coming in or if the wave is indeed going out. And that brings me to the brand new debut album from a band called Gurriers, called Come and See. Now, I should say, when I began this album review, and as you know here on the Last Mixtape podcast, we do reviews a little bit differently here now. We don't go song to song and try to go, this bit I liked and this bit I didn't. And I try to avoid as much as I can cliches and this is the next big thing or anything like that. When the first song on this album played, I admittedly was like, uh-oh, this is Gilliband. The song is called Nausea. It kicks off the record and this is just Gilliband. And indeed, those influences are very strong in that opening song. And there was a moment in which I went, uh-oh, if this entire album is that, this is not going to work. There already is a Gilliband, and Gilliband themselves were building on the shoulders of Whipping Boy and The Fall and all these types of bands. So there's not a problem with lineage, but there is a problem with what you do next. Once you add on to that thing, once you come in on the next wave, as it were, as Hunter S. Thompson would put it. So my first impression of the album from the very first song was one of trepidation, because there was such hype build around Gurriers. Indeed, I saw a lot of people, without listening to the album myself before, talking very highly of it, and I was very excited to listen to it. Now, you might be listening to this start and be going, oh, this is quite ominous. He doesn't like it. I have to say, it surprised me from that point on, because I was a little bit kind of going, oh, this is just another band trying to do the Gilliband thing. This might fall apart. But they surprised me after that point. They moved on very quickly. Des Goblins, which we've reviewed on this podcast before, moves into almost more psychedelic riff rock kind of feel. There's a more psychedelic, a little bit of early grunge kind of feel to it, which I felt, oh, okay, we're not in the kind of the Gilliband, and I love Gilliband, that there's an artistry to what they do, but that kind of doing that kind of thing, I felt, oh God, because you know, as I say, somebody's already currently doing that at this moment in time. So when Des Goblins came in, it was like, oh yes, okay, cool. We're not just there. And then when they played Prayers, it had that kind of gothic feel to it. It's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more pronounced. And I went, okay, this is proper. When we get into a couple of listens to this, we can really unfold what is happening. And my initial impression from the first song, I'd started to move away. What did kind of grab me about it was when I was on further listens to the record, I was trying to pick out, well, okay, there's a lot of influences here. There's a lot of influences going on, and you can say The Fall to Whipping Boy to Gilliband, even bands like Thumper on the Irish music scene as well, and little bits of Idols too. Where do Gurriers fall? Where is their unique selling point in this? Who are Gurriers in a world of these bands? If they are of the wave, what parts do they play? Are they on the crest of it? Indeed, to keep the analogy going. And it feels like that. It feels, there's a danceability to the record that really took me aside, and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. The drums, especially in this record, and the way the band play around it, and they move from that kind of riff-rocky, psychedelic feel to more gothic, to more overtly noise rock, Gilliband type stuff, and add a kind of a danceability and a propelledness to it. This is very much an album of energy, and you would come to expect that from a debut record from a band just beginning. And it does have that feral nature. In a way, it has an almost spiritual companionship to Doggerel from Fontaine's, which itself was a feral record made of its influences. And this is very much an album made on its influences. We've been talking recently about bubbles and post-punk bubbles, and these guys aren't post-punk, but they're noise rock, and they're in the Irish music industry. So it's a feeling at the moment, and I feel like we're at like a double helix, where one wave is kind of coming like this, and another wave is coming like this, and then the two waves meet in the middle, and we're kind of at the point where that one wave is going up and the other wave is going down. And if you get the reference that I just did there, you are in the right podcast and you're watching the right video. So comments below if you know what I just did there. But yes, I feel we're at the meeting of these double helixes. And one scene is going up and the other might be starting to go down. And I think we might be seeing a proficiency of the bands, the pups of Gilliband, if you will, coming up in that way. What I did think was very interesting that they also did on this record, Gurriers, is the song Interlude. Well, it's a kind of a motif, a little piece of the album. And I thought that's very clever. It's a very calm, very textured, kind of gentle piece of music within an album that was filled with fire and fury. And I went, that's clever. That's incredibly, younger bands, especially debut bands, fall foul to the kind of everything all at once. And that for 20 songs. Having the interlude bit in it, I went, that's very clever, because you have the moments like prayers and stuff like that have that kind of moment of respite within them, and they feel more considered. So that was the thing that really took me, the danceability of the album, the consideration of it. It's a band that understand their influences so much that they very much, at times, as I say, with Nausea, almost lean too into it. But then with songs like Das Goblins and the title track itself, really kind of come into their own. And the album as a whole lasts and survives with it, because the danceability of it is broken up with these quieter, more slightly introspective moments within the record. And I think as a whole, the entire record benefits greatly from it. Approachable and things like that. And I think it's very much in its way a pick and mix of their influences, and almost a soupçon of their type of music and what they're about. And I think that's good. We have to remember that debut albums are debut albums, and that this is a band very much coming to their own. I was actually quite surprised when I saw they were hitting the album so quickly. But I have to say they stuck the landing very well, because that's a difficult one to do so quickly, but sometimes you got to strike while the iron is hot, and they are very much doing that. I think as a record, it does really work well. I think if you've liked the stuff that they've done before, there's something in it there for you. I think if I were to make critiques, I think lyrical clarity is something that they'll have to come more into, because at times the vocal, and this can be a stylistic choice to make the vocals sound as if it is at one with the music, and it is part of that energy, and it is very much an energetic album at times. But I think a more clarity within the vocal, almost like within the rest of the album, would give the lyrics more time to stand out. I'm reminded of Idols and the best way to scare Tories to read and get rich. Incendiary lines, but that are repeated and clear, that you can get. So I think that might be more of a production thing. But I did feel that it missed that slightly defining moment for me. But as a whole, I thought the album was really, really well made. I think they show that they're a band that are not just made out of playing in small, small intimate venues, punk venues, that hard-hitting, get in, get out, loud, 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 loud. They understand the importance of quiet. They understand the importance of dynamics, of building up, way before a lot of other bands kind of get that feel and get that motif. So they feel very far into their career already, and this is a debut. So I think for that, I absolutely really liked this record. I thought it worked really well for those moments. I do think Nausea, whilst it does have that Gilliban thing down singing, is quite a standout track on the record. I think Come and See, the title track, is probably the best track and the best kind of insight into who they are as a band, as is Des Goblin too. The Goth in Me likes Prayers as well, and I think it really kind of comes into itself with those tracks and as an album, and I think it works in those ways. So in terms of standing on that steep hill that we're on now, looking out on the Irish music scene and wondering if that wave is coming in or going back out, is it ebbing or is it flowing? It's hard to know at this moment in time. I do feel sometimes like I'm prophesizing a doom that, like a Cassandra type, where I'm prophesizing a doom that is yet to come. I think right now, Gurriers have jumped on a crest of a wave and they are moving with that momentum. We've spoken about bands doing that in order to move themselves on away from that wave, disassociate themselves from it. I think that's important. I think they seem to me, that was the thing that really stuck out to me on this album, they seem to me like a band who know that. They seem to me like a band that probably are like, let's get the energy out, let's get the flow out, let's get this out, let's get ourselves out on this record, but there's much more to us than this. We've got stuff in our back catalogue, we've got stuff in our arsenal that we're going to use. Will they be eaten up by the sea? Will they lost in a sea of noise rock bands and bands doing stuff? I don't think so. There's moments in this album where I really felt, no, there's real moments there. Defining moments if we're going into a second album with them, and I don't want to rush them to literally just release this record. But if, moving into the rest of their second albums and stuff like that, defining moments, clarity, allowing those defining moments to really sit and rest. I think this is a great album. I really would recommend it. And I think it's interesting to see them as part of that wave that we were talking about a little bit earlier. But yeah, Gurriers, Come and See, definitely recommend it. Yes, they seek him here, they seek him there, those musos seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven or is he at the disco? That damned elusive Count of Monte playlist. Oh yes, dear listener, the style and profile and limousine riding, jet flying, playlist making son of a gun has once again returned to the shores of Playlistia to return with another beautiful bounty in the form of new Irish music on TLMT's Irish mixtape on Spotify. Let us begin with Kinsey and her brand new single Body, a melodically rich indie track with a big sound, and it's interesting to see how Kinsey has evolved over the years and the bigger the production and the more kitchen sink type sound going on now. It's really interesting because she is a songwriter whose music has kind of called for this high-end, high energy kind of production that this track has, and it very much seems like the sheen and the slickness has really come on, and that this song is being presented in the best kind of definition possible. And it's interesting to see because it feels like it's a song that very much could be on the radio, being played out in the scene and stuff like that. And it's great to see an artist like that have the paints and have the palette to explore their sound. And what an artist she is. And the brand new single is called Body, and check that out. Next up after that we have Skinner and Tell Me Ma, and this is a very interesting array of sounds, especially at the very beginning of the track. There's a lot going on. It has a kind of falling down, kind of a multitude of music happening, and we're talking about like finding interest and finding different things to do with the kind of the model of the shouty into Mikey kind of type sound. And I think there's a lot of idiosyncratic indie going on here, experimental stuff that really kind of works to his favour longer. He kind of has carved out a character and a style and a motif for himself that really works and plays with it, and using that I'll tell me ma kind of type thing as well in a more shouty, punkish way. I think it's a really interesting track from an artist who has really grown into something more stylistic and, as I say, idiosyncratic throughout his releases, and has to be commended for finding a voice and style within the genre. So yeah, definitely would say check that out. Tell Me Ma, it's up on the playlist by Skinner. Next up, we have Lord Jane with the track Tulips. And this is an interesting track as well in terms of its very incredibly vivid, syncopated and vibrant sound. It was definitely something that just took me the moment I listened to it. It was like, oh, there's a musical intelligence, there's a musical maturity to what's happening here. There's a lot going on, but they seem to be able to really hold it together and within this kind of jolting, more modern aspect. Sometimes when you go into musics that are more complex, for lack of a better term, you can lose people and you can lose the interest. But I think as well, vocally and songwriting in terms of the lyrics and stuff like that, the song very much holds together and holds under the kind of more intricate musicality that's weaving its way around it, and that's very hard to do. You need to ground it and put it into a place. And this is admittedly my first listen to Lord Jane as a band, and Tulips is my first listen to them as a group, and I have to say I was really taken by this track as well, but just again the maturity and the musicality, and also the maturity in knowing how to ground the music vocally, because that's going to be always at the forefront lyrically as well, like that. And I think that this is a compelling track by Lord Jane. Tulips, check it out, it's on the playlist. Following that, we have Ro with her brand new single Caravan, and yeah, this is again going into that kind of jagged, more indie feel that Ro has moved into with their last couple of releases, and it has this kind of 90s loose indie sway to it, but it also contains that pop multitude of allowing the chorus to breathe, allowing the hooks to speak, allowing the songwriting, and it's quite intricate songwriting with Ro as well, and quite emotional songwriting, but it's incredibly deft and clever songwriting at the same time, and that she's wrapped it in this slightly harder edged sound and with a little bit more grit added to it as well. And I think that really kind of comes to it. There's bits of that gritty, maybe like almost Phoebe Bridgers, a little bit of Orla Gartland in there, and a lot of herself, a lot of Ro in there too. And she is, yeah, once again, almost like we're talking about Kinsey, is opening the scope of the sound, opening the scope of her songwriting, and creating it more interestingly, giving her a larger palette to draw from and a larger sound to draw from. And it's interesting to see with her releases. Some have been more monochrome, some more reserved, and some have been more overt in their popness, and some are more overt in their indiness. And yeah, she's an artist who is very much straddling a number of different genres and doing it so well and so deftly. And it's great to see her being so proficient with that as well. So Caravan is the name of the single. The Count has chosen it. It is on the playlist. Check it out, or check it out for her via all her Spotify's and Bandcamps and all that stuff, wherever you want to listen to music. I am not the boss of you. You can do whatever you want when it comes to listening to music, dear listener. I am not the boss of you. Finally, we shall go to Gemma Bradley and Come and Go. And yeah, a release from Gemma Bradley, she of the radio. Stylistic pop is incredibly slick, really well produced, very stylistic, as I say, held together by Bradley's own vocals and harmonies, and you know, a strong performance within something that is very much swing for the fences pop. Wants you to, you know, wants to get on the radio itself, wants the hooks, wants to expose the listener to kind of earworms and stuff like that, and that it does. It is a incredibly engaging song in that way. It's really well handled in that way. Bradley is able to hold the foreground as the main focus, as always with pop. It's going to be the lyrics, it's going to be the vocalists themselves, it's going to be the performance, and she does that incredibly well within a very strong production and a very vivid production as well to go with that. And Gemma Bradley coming out with a new single, and a very strong one at that, a very strong pop track by Gemma Bradley, Come and Go, and that is also on the playlist. Yes, and that is it for The Count this week. All of these songs can be found on TLMT's Irish mixtape on Spotify, where The Count curates another beautiful bounty of Irish music, and there are music from last week, the weeks before, all those types of things. So do delve into it, delve into the new music coming from the Irish music scene, curated by The Count, the greatest playlister in the history of playlisting and the history of the history of history itself. The Count shall return next week with new picks, so do come along for The Count shall return next week. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and viewing the Last Mixtape podcast. You can find us here on Spotify, on Apple, and indeed on YouTube through the visual medium. I'm staring at you straight now through the camera lens. Please like and subscribe and comment and give me your thoughts on some of the music that we talked about and some of the issues we talked about in this week's episode. You're always welcome to do so by emailing Stephen@thelastmixtape.com with the heading TLNT podcast. And if you want your music featured by the Count himself, email that also. And I will pass it on to him because it's very important to remember that me and the Count are two completely different people. But for now, that was the Last Mixtape podcast. You were a listener. I was Stephen White. Hey. So long.